two Spanish words. And buenas tardes, good afternoon. I want to thank Director Girardo and the faculty members and Dr. Abril for giving me this opportunity.
Agradezco al director Gerardo y a los demás miembros de la facultad que están aquí presentes.
And for you also, it is not very often that you get to listen from an exile leader.
Y pues para ustedes seguro no es algo normal escuchar a un líder en el exilio.
So I hope the time that we will spend together from now will be useful for you and also for me.
Y espero que el tiempo que pasemos juntos ahora sea muy útil para ustedes y para mí.
Of course, I'm sure you know about His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
Pues estoy seguro de que han escuchado sobre su santidad de Dalai Lama.
I'm a very ordinary person.
Yo soy una persona muy ordinaria.
Because of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I'm in this position, democratically elected by Tibetans all over the world, except inside Tibet.
Pero gracias a su santidad Dalai Lama, yo estoy aquí como una figura democrática electa por todos los tibetanos en el mundo, menos dentro de Tíbet.
Today, the Tibetans are spread across some 26 different countries.
Hoy, las personas tibetanas están alrededor de 36 países.
Therefore, to meet my people and also to advocate with governments, parliaments, I have to travel a lot, so I travel 6-7 months in a year.
Entonces, pues para reunirme con mis personas, con mi gente y con demás líderes políticos, pues llevo alrededor de 6 a 7 meses al año.
So this also gives me a lot of exposure to meet with people from different parts of the world.
Y pues eso también me genera mucha exposición para reunirme con personas de todas las partes del mundo.
And this is my second visit to Mexico.
Esta es mi segunda visita a México.
And second to Guadalajara.
Y a Guadalajara también.
Maybe the first time to Guadalajara University.
Y mi primera vez en la Universidad de Guadalajara.
So thank you very much again for the opportunity, because Chinese government is Chinese are everywhere.
Muchas gracias nuevamente por la oportunidad, porque bueno, pues el gobierno chino está en todos lados.
So after this event, hopefully Dr. Breed or Director Girardo does not receive a love letter from the Chinese embassy.
Entonces esperemos que después de esta conferencia, tanto la doctora Abril como el doctor Gerardo no reciban una carta de amor de la embajada de China.
And I would advise you to wear it with a badge of honor.
Pero les recomiendo que si la reciben la tengan con una medalla de honor.
If you are not able to stand up for your values,
Si
China
una persona no se levanta por sus valores,
China will never respect you.
los chinos nunca van a respetar.
Of course, we can talk a lot about what China is doing around the world.
Podemos hablar muchísimo sobre lo que China está haciendo en el resto del mundo.
And the reason why I'm here is not just to talk about Tibet, but I'm also worried about Mexico.
Y pues la razón por la que estoy aquí no es solo para hablar de Tibet, sino de mi preocupación por México.
But the title of today's talk is Human Rights and Cultural Preservation of Tibet,
Hoy vamos a hablar de los derechos humanos y la preservación cultural de Tíbet
and the responsibility of the global community.
y la responsabilidad de la comunidad global.
This morning I had an interesting session with ITESCO University.
A esta mañana pude ir a la Universidad de Teso.
Unfortunately, I think my talk this morning was not recorded.
Desafortunadamente creo que no la grabaron la
I understand Professor Abril told me that you have also students online
La doctora Abril también ahora comentó que había también estudiantes en línea
who are at home or working.
que igual están en casa trabajando.
So my greetings and tashidele to everybody. Thank you so much.
Les doy la bienvenida, muchas gracias y tashi debe, esa es la frase que ellos utilizan para dar la bienvenida.
So maybe before we talk about the current situation, human rights situation or cultural situation inside Tibet,
Entonces, antes de hablar de la situación de derechos humanos o de la situación cultural dentro de Tibet,
I will take the liberty to speak a little bit about Tibet itself.
me voy a tomar la libertad de hablar un poquito de Tibet por sí mismo.
If you don't understand that context, then it's difficult to understand the current context.
Es importante conocer ese contexto para poder entender el contexto actual.
So we come from the land called Tibet, as you know.
Bueno, venimos de la tierra llamada Tíbet, como bien saben.
And the Tibetan plateau is the highest and the biggest plateau on earth.
Y la meseta tibetana es la más alta y más amplia de todo el mundo.
And the Tibetan plateau came about because of the tectonic shift between the Indian plate and the Eurasian plate some 50 million years ago.
Y pues Tibet se formó gracias al movimiento de las placas tectónicas entre la placa india y la placa euroasiática hace 50 millones de años.
Since then, Tibetan plateau has been growing and growing and growing, and today the average altitude of Tibetan plateau is about 16,000 feet.
Y pues esto ha sido, Tibet ha ido creciendo y subiendo y subiendo, y ahora el promedio de altitud es alrededor de 16,000 pies.
Even now, scientists say that the Himalayas is growing by 10 millimeters every year.
Inclusive se cree que dicen los expertos que los Himalayas crecen 10 milímetros al año.
And the tectonic plates are very active, just like in Mexico.
Y así como en México, las placas tectónicas están muy activas.
I was told that you had some disastrous earthquakes, about 7 magnitude.
Pues me han dicho que aquí tienen muchos desastres y temblores de hasta 7 grados.
We also had one last year, end of last year, or beginning of this year in Tibet, 7.1.
Nosotros también tuvimos un temblor de 7.1 grados a inicios de este año en Tibet.
So we always lived in the mountains. Our people lived in the mountains, and not many Tibetans have traveled outside Tibet.
Así que nosotros siempre hemos vivido en las montañas, las personas tibetanas siempre se han sentado en las montañas y no han salido mucho de ahí.
No airplanes, no roads, no motors.
No hay aviones, no hay caminos, no hay forma de entrar.
So you have to climb 14, 15, 16,000 high mountains, then down valleys, then mountains. So not many foreigners also could come into Tibet.
Entonces hay que subir y bajar 14, 15, 16,000 pies y bajarlos y volver a subir y bajar. Entonces, pues históricamente no muchas personas extranjeras entraron a Tibet.
And we were an independent nation.
Pero somos una nación independiente.
Tibet was never ever directly ruled by any government, including China in the past.
Tibet nunca había sido parte de ningún imperio ni de ningún otro gobierno, ni siquiera de China en el pasado.
But I won't go into all those details because Chinese government claims that Tibet has been part of China since ancient times.
Pero no quisiera entrar en esos detalles porque lo que dice el gobierno chino es que Tibet ha sido parte de China desde tiempos ancestrales.
The Chinese government themselves don't know when is ancient times.
Pero entonces el gobierno chino pues no tiene idea de lo que significa decir tiempos ancestrales.
Well, I can recommend you 2 books without going into details about Tibetan history.
No quiero entrar mucho en los detalles de la historia tibetana, pero les voy a recomendar 2 libros.
One is Tibet Brief 2020.
Uno es el Tibet Brief, así lo encuentran, de 2020.
It is written by an expert on international law.
Fue escrito por un experto en derecho internacional.
Dr. Michael Van Walt Van Praag. Names you don't need to repeat, I think they're here.
El doctor.
Sorry, because she's learning to be a professional translator.
Patience, please.
And his partner, Nick Boltius. So they looked at Tibetan history from international legal aspect.
Entonces vieron a la situación de Tibet desde el aspecto del derecho internacional.
So that is after the Second World War, the formation of the United Nations and definition of modern nation state as we understand today.
Y pues esto es tras la Segunda Guerra Mundial, la formación de las Naciones Unidas y pues esta concepción que tenemos de los Estados-Nación actual.
And every region in the world has different kinds of history and different kinds of definition of sovereignty those days.
Y pues cada región diferente, cada cultura tiene diferentes conocimientos de lo que significa la soberanía.
So Michael worked with about 60, 70 scholars from not only Tibet but from around the nations around Tibet for about 6 years.
Entonces Michael trabajó con 60, 70 académicos de regiones aledañas al Tíbet por
6 years.
Por 6 años.
And he came out with this book.
Y así es como desarrolló este libro.
And establishes the fact that according to international law or norms of sovereignty those days, Tibet was always or had always been an independent state and had never been under China.
Entonces, según ellos, en su investigación, según el derecho internacional público, según el entendimiento de la soberanía de cada una de estas naciones, Tibet siempre ha sido independiente.
And there is another book by a Chinese professor
También hay otro libro de un profesor
who
chino
lives not very far from you.
que no vive tan lejos de aquí,
He lives in Santiago today.
vive en Santiago.
And he, when he was a school student in China
Y cuando era estudiante de la escuela en
in
China,
the 50s and 60s,
en los 50s y 60s,
the Chinese government used to teach them that Tibet has been part of China since ancient times.
el gobierno chino les enseñaba que Tíbet ha sido parte de China desde tiempos ancestrales.
Then when he was in his university days, just like you now,
Pero al estar en sus tiempos de universidad como ustedes están aquí ahora,
then he found that the communist Chinese government was asking every other government to say that Tibet is part of People's Republic of China.
entonces entendió que el gobierno chino es el que le pide a los demás países que también estén diciendo que Tíbet es parte de la República Popular de China.
And as a student, he was very intrigued by this.
Y a él como estudiante esto le intrigó demasiado.
If Tibet had been part of China since ancient times, why is the communist government asking every government to say Tibet is part of PRC?
Se preguntó cómo es que si Tíbet ha sido parte de China desde tiempos ancestrales, es que el gobierno chino les está pidiendo a los demás países que enseñen esto.
Then he became a professor and now he's retired. So after his retirement,
Entonces se convirtió en profesor, después se retiró y tras su retiro,
he downloaded the Imperial Chinese historical records from the Communist Party website.
entonces descargó los
Imperial Chinese historical records.
sí, los registros imperiales de China que tenía el Partido Comunista de China, el Partido Popular, y
If you can consider the Mongols as Chinese, then he looked at the Yuan dynasty.
y entonces pues él dijeron, no, pues si tienes que considerar entonces a Mongolia como China, en la dinastía Tang.
The Mongols ruled China from 1271 to 1368.
Los mongoles dominaron China desde 1800.
And that period is called the Yuan dynasty. 1271 to 1368.
Desde 1971 hasta 1368.
But of course, Mongolians don't consider themselves Chinese.
Pero pues los mongoles no se consideran los hijos de China.
And from Chinese perspective, if the Mongolians are Chinese, then they can claim half of the world because Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan invaded that much part of the world.
Entonces, si en este caso China considera que Mongolia es suyo, pues entonces la mitad del mundo es suyo casi.
And we had relations with the Mongols even before the Mongols invaded China.
Pero nosotros los tibetanos ya teníamos relaciones con Mongolia inclusive antes de que los mongoles invadieran China.
And then he looked at the Ming dynasty,
Y entonces podemos ver a este Ming,
who overthrew the Yuan dynasty
y después vamos a ver este Yuan.
and ruled China from 1368 to 1644.
Y entonces está gobernado desde 1368 a 1634.
During the Ming dynasty, Tibetans and Chinese don't have much relations.
Durante la dinastía Ming, los tibetanos y los chinos no tuvieron muchas relaciones.
Then the Mings were overthrown by the Qings.
Y entonces se fueron los chinos.
And the Qings are Manchus.
Y entonces los chinos son manchúes.
They also don't consider themselves to be Chinese.
Ellos no se consideran a sí mismos chinos.
Do you watch Chinese Kung Fu movies?
¿Ustedes ven películas de Kung Fu chinas?
If you watch Chinese Kung Fu movies, all the protagonists are Chinese.
Si las vieran, todos los protagonistas son chinos.
And all the antagonists are Manchus.
Y todos los antagonistas son manchúes.
So the societal perspective of the Chinese people is Manchus are not Chinese.
Entonces, la perspectiva social de las personas de China es que los manchúes no son chinos.
And they ruled China from 1644 to 1911.
Y entonces ellos gobernaron China desde 1644 hasta 1911.
So Professor Lau looked at all these imperial Chinese historical records
Y entonces el profesor Lau vio toda esta documentación de la China imperial
and proves that imperial China has never considered Tibet part of China.
y probó que el imperio chino jamás consideró a Tíbet como parte de China.
So he published his book in Chinese several years ago,
Y él publicó este libro en chino hace muchos años.
and it took some time to get it translated into English.
Y pues tardó un poco de tiempo que lo tradujeran al inglés.
So the English version will be out in 1 to 2 months.
Entonces la versión inglesa salió en 1 o 2 meses.
And through our representative, Mr. Jigme, or through our friends, Karna, we will make sure that you receive one copy.
Y tal vez a través de nuestro representante, Jigme, que es el representante para América Latina del gobierno estatal tibetano, podremos tener cada uno una copia.
I hope you will put enough energy to read this 1,300 pages book.
Espero que puedan leer este libro de 3,000 páginas.
So these two will answer all the questions without me going into the details of history.
Entonces estos dos libros que les recomiendo los pueden leer para tener el contexto histórico y que no lo tenemos que abarcar ahora.
Now coming to today's topic,
Entonces, viniendo al tema del día,
when the whole world after Second World War was gaining independence from colonialism and imperialism,
entonces, después de la Segunda Guerra Mundial, cuando todo el mundo ya se estaba independizando y estaba luchando contra el colonialismo,
unfortunately, Tibet fell under the wave of communism that took over that part of the world.
desafortunadamente Tíbet también fue parte de esa ola del comunismo que se hizo en esa parte del mundo.
And we lost our independence in 1951.
Y perdimos nuestra independencia en 1951.
China invaded Tibet on October 7, 1950.
China invadió Tíbet el 7 de octubre de 1950.
The world was too busy with Korean War that was going on,
Pero el mundo estaba muy ocupado con la guerra de Corea en el momento.
and we remained isolated for too long,
Y pues nos aislamos por mucho tiempo.
so there was not enough attention on Tibet.
Entonces no había mucha atención de Tíbet.
Then 7 months after that, we were forced to sign the so-called 17-point agreement by the Chinese government.
Y entonces 7 meses después fuimos forzados a firmar el acuerdo el tratado de los 17 acuerdos por parte del gobierno chino.
On the threat of war
Bajo la amenaza de guerra
that could have killed many, many Tibetans.
que hubiera matado muchísimos tibetanos.
But unfortunately, even after Tibet's occupation,
Pero desafortunadamente, aún después de la ocupación de Tíbet,
Communist China destroyed about 6,000 Tibetan monasteries.
el gobierno chino destruyó nuestros 6,000 templos tibetanos budistas.
1.2 million Tibetans died as a direct or indirect result of China's occupation.
Y alrededor de 1,2 millones de tibetanos fallecieron por causa directa o indirecta de la ocupación china.
And there was 10 long years of cultural revolution between 1966 to 76.
Entonces hubo 10 largos años de la Revolución Cultural China de 1966 a 1976.
And Mao Zedong's Red Army unleashed terror in Tibet.
Y el ejército rojo de Mao Zedong esparció el terror en Tíbet.
Then Deng Xiaoping came in
Entonces llegó el poder de Xiaoping
and introduced reform. introduced reform,
introdujo las reformas,
because of which China has become so powerful now.
por las cuales China es ahora tan poderoso como es.
So during Deng Xiaoping's time and his premier Hu Yaobang's time in the 80s, there was little freedom in Tibet.
Entonces, durante su gobierno posterior en los 80 había muy poca libertad de vida.
But then again, by the late 80s, Hu Jintao became the party secretary in Tibet.
Pero entonces, para el final de los 80s,
And he put martial law in Tibet. Hu Jintao.
bueno, entonces
At that time, he was not the president of China.
Entonces Hu Jintao, al final de los 80 puso la ley marcial en el Tíbet, aún no era el presidente en China.
So after that, there was Tsering,
Después de esto entró Tsering
then there was Hu Jintao as president of China.
y Hu Jintao como presidente de China.
If you remember a few years back, Hu Jintao at the plenum of the Communist Party was taken out of the hall. Did you witness that?
¿Ustedes vieron esto de que Hu Jintao, cuando era presidente,
He was at the plenum, when the plenum was in session with more than 3,000 people in that hall, Hu Jintao had doubts about Xi Jinping's intentions, about some names of the political members.
no sé si se acuerdan que Hu Jintao, al estar en el pleno con 300, 400 personas, le bajó un poco los ánimos a Xi Jinping, perdón.
Xi Jinping was sitting
Xi
here,
Jinping estaba sentado
Hu Jintao was sitting here,
estaba aquí,
yeah, and people in the Politburo like Tsai Shi and others were sitting there.
y la gente del Politburo estaba del otro lado.
He was looking at the files
Él estaba viendo los archivos,
because there were names of the new Politburo members.
porque estaban los nombres de los nuevos miembros del Politburo.
Because the normal tradition in the Communist Party is when a president is leaving, then you have to have your people in the new Politburo to save your ass.
La tradición del gobierno chino es que pues cuando cambia un presidente a otro, tú tienes que tener a tus personas en el Politburo para que te estén salvando.
But for the first time, Xi Jinping put all his people in the Politburo.
Pero por primera vez Xi Jinping puso a todas estas personas en el Politburo.
So Hu Jintao was trying to check the names, the others were trying to close it.
Entonces Hu Jintao estaba viendo los nombres y los otros estaban queriendo cerrar la carpeta.
So he was lifted and taken out of the conference.
Y lo levantaron y se lo llevaron del evento.
And he was not seen since
Y nadie lo volvió
in
a ver
public.
en público.
That is what happens in China.
Eso es lo que pasa en China.
In Russia, you have oligarchs falling from buildings and dying.
En Rusia tienen a los oligarcas cayendo por millones.
In China, you have leaders like Li Keqiang
En China,
dying in swimming pool.
en China tienen líderes como
Li Keqiang,
Li Keqiang,
who worked with Xi Jinping in his first term as the premier.
quien trabajó con Xi Jinping en su primer término como primer ministro.
He was healthy, he was not that old,
Él no estaba tan viejo y no estaba tan enfermo,
but he was said to have died in a swimming pool.
pero lo mandaron a morir literalmente.
So, this is how communist government functions.
Así es como funciona este gobierno comunista.
So, today, under Xi Jinping,
Entonces hoy, bajo el mando de Xi Jinping,
the overall policy for the nationalities like Tibetans or East Turkestanis or Mongolians,
la política nacional para naciones como los tibetanos, como los uigures,
that if there are no nationalities, then there will be no nationality issues.
ellos dicen que si no hay nacionalidades adentro de China, no va a haber problemas de nacionalidad.
So how do you make sure that there are no nationalities? Because there are 56 nationalities, including Han in China.
Entonces, ¿cómo es que te aseguras de que no haya nacionalidades si hay más de 56 diferentes, incluyendo las Han?
So they strike at the very root of our identity.
Entonces atacan la mera raíz de nuestra identidad.
Are you Indian, by the way?
Yes.
Okay. So our identity is rooted in our language.
Nuestra identidad tiene base en nuestro lenguaje.
Tibetan language is one among the 15 oldest languages in this world.
El lenguaje tibetano es uno de los 15 más antiguos del mundo.
And Tibetan language has nothing to do with Chinese language.
Y no tiene nada que ver con el chino.
It came from the Devanagari script of India. Devanagari.
viene de Devanagari, de India.
Came from India. So linguistically, we are much more closer to India.
Entonces, lingüísticamente, pues nos acercamos muchísimo más a India.
And Tibetan Buddhism also came from India
Y también el budismo tibetano viene de India,
in 8th century.
en el siglo VIII.
And we, Tibetans, transliterated every available Sanskrit and Pali Buddhist text into Tibetan from 8th to 13th century, for 5 centuries.
Entonces, nosotros los tibetanos transliteramos cada uno de los escritos que había en sánscrito sobre el budismo del siglo VIII al siglo XIII.
So if you include the composition of Tibetan masters over centuries,
Entonces, si ustedes unen todas estas enseñanzas de los maestros tibetanos por siglos,
we have more than 100,000 titles or books,
más de 100,000 diferentes libros.
and you must have undertaken one of the biggest transliteration at one time.
Entonces, debimos de haber sido parte de una de las mayores transliteraciones del mundo.
And one of our monks several years ago worked on a Tibetan to Tibetan dictionary.
Hace muchos años, un monje tibetano trabajó en el diccionario tibetano.
Can you imagine how many volumes or books?
¿Cuántos volúmenes creen que tenía?
223
223.
Tibetan to Tibetan dictionary.
Un diccionario tibetano.
Now this is the most voluminous dictionary in the world.
El diccionario más voluminoso que existe.
So we presented one to the Czech Republic National Library,
Llevamos uno a la Biblioteca Nacional de República Checa.
and last December we presented one 223 sets to the Library of Congress in the United States.
Y entonces, el diciembre pasado también llevamos una a la Biblioteca del Congreso de Estados Unidos, todos los volúmenes.
No, it's too heavy to carry, otherwise we would have brought one set here.
Pues es muy pesado, si no, aquí lo tendríamos.
So that speaks for the importance of Tibetan language.
Entonces esto nos dice de la importancia del lenguaje tibetano.
If you want to study Buddha's teaching in its entirety,
Si quieres estudiar toda la enseñanza del Buda,
today Tibetan is the only language that you can do.
solo se puede hacer en tibetano.
That is why China is striking at Tibetan language.
Por eso es que China está atacando tanto al lenguaje tibetano.
So they started colonial style boarding schools.
Entonces empezaron con escuelas tipo colonialistas.
If you are interested, there is a report on the boarding schools in Tibet by the United Nations.
Si les interesa el reporte de las Naciones Unidas sobre este sistema de internados,
Special rapporteurs.
de los relatores especiales.
So now, Tibetan children from the age of 4
Entonces actualmente los niños tibetanos desde que tienen 4 años
are taken away from their homes
son quitados de sus casas
and put in the boarding schools.
y puestos en los internados,
Away from their family,
fuera de sus familias,
away from their culture,
lejos de su cultura,
away from their language.
lejos de su lenguaje,
So they teach only Mandarin.
y solo les enseñan mandarín.
Small kids,
Niños así de
4
pequeños,
years old.
solo 4 años.
These days when they come home, they don't speak Tibetan
Entonces
anymore.
cuando regresan a su casa no hablan tibetano.
What the Chinese government does
Lo que hace el gobierno chino
is they have Chinese cartoons for 4 years old to watch all day.
tienen caricaturas en chino para que los niños vean desde esas edades todo el día.
So the idea
Entonces la idea
is to change one generation of Tibetans into Chinese,
cambiar toda esta generación de tibetanos y hacerlos chinos,
so that there is no more Tibetanness.
para que no haya más tibetanidad.
Tibetan Buddhism,
El budismo tibetano
they call it Buddhism with Chinese characteristics.
dicen que es el budismo con características chinas.
Many monasteries are rebuilt physically,
Han reconstruido muchos monasterios de los que
but
estuvieron,
now it's like a facade.
pero es como una fachada,
There's no real learning there.
porque no existe verdadera enseñanza de
In
Dios.
some of the monasteries where we used to have 3,000, 5,000, 7,000 monks,
En algunos de los monasterios tenemos 3, 5, 7 mil monjes.
now it is reduced to 200, 250 monks.
Ahora están entre 200 y 250 monjes.
And you cannot become a monk below the age of 18 under Chinese law.
Y bajo el gobierno chino no te puedes convertir en monje antes de los 18 años.
And if Dr. Reed wants to become a nun,
Y si, por ejemplo, la doctora quisiera ser una monja,
can you imagine with her shaved head?
imagínense el cabello,
You need 4 guarantors
necesitas a 4 personas que
to
garanticen,
make sure that she does not commit any political activity in the nunnery.
que garanticen que no ha cometido actos políticos.
In Free Tibet,
En el Tíbet libre,
monks and nuns can travel to different parts of the world, learn, teach, do everything.
los monjes y las monjas viajaban a todas las partes del mundo para enseñar y aprender de todo.
Now, if monks and nuns have to travel, they need at least 4 or 5 different permits.
Ahora, si los monjes o monjas quieren viajar, necesitan 4 o 5 permisos.
The management of the monasteries have been taken over by multiple security agencies.
Y el manejo de los monasterios ahora es parte de distintos ministerios de seguridad.
Chinese government that does not believe in any religion sets a curriculum for Buddhist studies.
El gobierno de China no cree en ninguna religión.
Now they want to be responsible for recognizing reincarnated lamas.
Y ahora inclusive quieren ser responsables de reconocer las reencarnaciones de los lamas.
So they passed a law
Entonces pasaron una ley,
called Order Number 5
se llama la Orden número 5,
in 2007.
en 2007.
They are waiting for this Dalai Lama to die many years ago.
Desde entonces están esperando que su santidad fallezca.
And this Dalai Lama, the 14th Dalai Lama, is now 90 years old.
Y este Dalai Lama, que es el 14º Dalai Lama, ya cumplió 90 años.
We just celebrated his 90th birthday,
Acabamos de celebrar, de hecho, su cumpleaños 90.
and we celebrate his birthday as the year of compassion throughout this year.
Y estamos celebrando su cumpleaños denominando el año de la compasión.
Because the message of His Holiness the Dalai Lama at this point of time when there's so much violence in the world is very, very relevant.
Porque ese es el mensaje de su santidad en este punto de la historia en el que hay tantísima violencia.
And those messages are rooted in ancient Indian wisdom.
Y esos mensajes inclusive están enraizados
Ancient Indian wisdom.
en el conocimiento antiguo indio.
The concept of ahimsa, non-violence,
El concepto de la no violencia
and the concept of karuna, compassion.
y el concepto de la compasión.
So China is striking at Tibetan religion,
Entonces China está atacando a la religión tibetana.
and then Tibet's environment.
Y entonces también al medio ambiente tibetano.
China behaves like a huge colonial power,
Se está comportando como una potencia colonial
and they control every resource of Tibet,
y controla todos los recursos tibetanos.
not just minerals.
No solo los minerales,
Because lately they found some large lithium deposits in Tibet,
porque acaban de encontrar de hecho un gran pozo de litio en Tíbet,
which are very important for producing rare earth.
que pues es
metals.
muy importante para las tierras raras y para producir estos minerales.
And I think, I don't remember whether I mentioned, because we call our land surrounded by snow mountain ranges.
Creo que no les había comentado, pero nosotros llamamos nuestra tierra que está rodeada por guerreros de la nieve.
We have 3,600 kilometers of border with India in the Himalayas.
Porque tenemos 3.600 de kilómetros de frontera con India, que son los Himalayas.
Then there's the Karakoram mountain ranges in the west of Tibet.
Está en Cácora, la
Karakoram.
cordillera.
Then you have the Kun mountains in the north of Tibet.
Están también las montañas Kun al norte.
And then you have Yenchen Tangla and many mountains in the east of Tibet.
Y también están las montañas Tanga al este.
So if you watch a satellite image of Tibet, you will see that Tibet is like this,
Entonces, si
High.
pudiéramos ver,
mountainous, and not all places are habitable.
y si pudiéramos ver entonces aquí desde el horizonte veríamos una tierra que está saliendo y que en la mayoría de los lugares es tan alto que hasta es inhabitable.
The very few Western Christian missionaries who managed to come to Tibet,
De los pocos misioneros cristianos que sí pudieron entrar a Tíbet,
they call Tibet the roof of the world because of its altitude.
le llamaron el techo del mundo por esa altitud.
And Chinese environmental scientists today call Tibet the third pole.
Y los medioambientalistas chinos actualmente le llaman el tercer polo del mundo.
So you have North Pole, you have South Pole, and Tibet Pole, the third
Tenemos
pole.
al polo norte, al polo sur y al tercer polo.
Because Tibet has the largest amount of glaciers and permafrost that feeds all these major rivers in Asia.
Porque tiene, después de estos polos, la mayor cantidad de glaciares y permafrost en el mundo.
So you have the Yellow and Yangtze going to China.
Entonces tenemos el río que nace y el río amarillo y el río Yangtze que llega a China.
And the Chinese civilization came into being on the banks of Yellow River.
Y entonces la misma civilización china nació a los pies del río amarillo.
Without these two rivers, China cannot support its 1.4 billion people.
Sin estos, China no podría sostener a su población de 1.400 millones de personas.
And the Mekong that originates from Tibet, Mekong River,
Y el río Mekong,
that originates from Tibet flows into 5 Southeast Asian countries.
que se origina en el Tíbet, llega a 5 países del sudeste asiático.
Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Burma. And Salween flows into Burma. Brahmaputra, which starts from Western Tibet, I'll say for a little time. With Brahmaputra, from Western Tibet to Eastern Tibet, takes a U-turn, goes into India and Bangladesh. Karnali into Nepal. Indus and Jhelum flow from Tibet, goes into India, and then it goes into Pakistan. Indus Valley is the cradle of Harappan culture, Indus Valley civilizations.
Entonces, por ejemplo, el río Indus, pues es de donde nacen todas estas civilizaciones.
Two of the oldest civilizations started from the banks of rivers that originate from Tibet.
Entonces, dos de las más antiguas civilizaciones nacen de ríos que se originan en Tíbet.
And the Tibetan people have lived on that plate for more than 30,000 years.
Y pues las personas en Tíbet tenemos viviendo ahí desde hace más de 30,000 años.
That is according to the latest findings. If they find something more old, then they will say 50,000, 60,000. But as of today, scientists say Tibetans have lived on the plateau for more than 30,000 years.
Esto se cree por los hallazgos que se han encontrado en la Universidad Tibetana, ¿no? Se encuentra algo más antiguo que tal vez 40, 50, 60,000 años atrás.
The names of all these 10 countries I mentioned are some of the most densely populated areas in the world.
Y todos estos países que les mencionaba, pues son de los países con la mayor densidad poblacional en el mundo.
China does not have any water sharing agreement with any of its downstream countries.
China no tiene ningún acuerdo sobre el agua con ninguno de estos países.
They don't even have hydrological data sharing. Forget about water sharing. No, they don't even share hydrological data with the downstream countries.
Y no comparten los datos hidrológicos, ni siquiera ya dejen que comparte el agua, tampoco comparte los datos.
Now there are multiple hydroelectricity dams on Tibetan rivers. We counted up to 193 dams so far.
Hemos contado hasta ahora que hay 193 represas que producen energía.
They will go up to 300.
Podrían ser hasta 300.
Now lately, China has announced a mega dam.
Y últimamente China anunció un mega represa.
The biggest dam today is in China, the Three Gorges Dam.
La represa más grande actualmente está en China.
Now I mentioned about the Brahmaputra and the U-turn it takes to come into India at this place called Methok, which is very close to Northeast India.
Les comentaba que el Brahmaputra baja y hace una vuelta en y entonces está esta zona que se llama Methok, que está al noreste de India.
And they are investing $160 billion in this dam.
Y están invirtiendo 1.6 mil millones de dólares en este represa.
To produce 2.8 times the hydroelectricity than the Three Gorges Dam.
Para producir al menos 2.8 más, veces más de la energía hidroeléctrica que producen.
That they can supply to 300 million users, customers.
Para dar al menos 300,000
300 million
millones, hogares.
But these are not meant for Tibetan people.
Pero pues esto no es para los tibetanos.
All this hydroelectricity goes to eastern China to feed the industries.
Toda esta energía hidroeléctrica va al este de China para alimentar a las industrias.
Because China produces produces 1/3 of world's manufactured goods.
Porque China produce al menos un tercio de la manufactura en el mundo.
Yesterday, she took us on a street in Mexico City which sells a lot of toys.
Ayer en la Ciudad de México, en el centro, pasamos por una ciudad que vendía puros juguetes.
I was looking through the window on the packages,
Y veía en la calle pues, los paquetes.
made in China.
Todo decía hecho en China.
This time, when I came to Mexico airport,
Esta vez al venir al aeropuerto de México,
waiting for our baggage to come,
mientras esperábamos nuestras maletas,
BYD cars.
había muchísimos anuncios de BYD.
And coming into the city,
Y pues al venir a la ciudad,
Xiaomi mobiles.
había tantos anuncios de Xiaomi.
You import $140 billion worth of goods from China.
Ustedes importan 140,000 millones de dólares en bienes y
And
servicios.
you are exporting only 15 to 20 billion to China.
Y exportan solo de 15 a 20 millones.
So you buy 10 times more from China than what you sell to China.
Entonces compran al menos 10 veces más de lo que le mandan.
And one ordinary Mexican told me, oh, Chinese goods are cheap, so we buy Chinese goods.
El otro día en una conferencia una persona me decía, pero pues es que los productos chinos son muy baratos y son buenos.
I said that is good for the immediate customers.
Dije, pues eso es bueno para el consumidor inmediato.
But as a Mexican nation,
Pero como nación mexicana,
in the long term, it's not good for you.
en el largo plazo no es bueno para ti.
That is why I'm worried.
Por eso estoy preocupado,
The more cheap goods you buy from China,
porque entre más bienes baratos compren de China,
your small-scale industries will die.
sus micros, medianas y pequeñas empresas van a morir.
Your people will lose jobs.
Sus personas perderán trabajos.
Your people will not have salary.
Sus pueblos perderán sus salarios.
Then you cannot even buy cheap Chinese goods.
Y entonces ya ni siquiera van a poder comprar estos bienes tan baratos de China.
This is what needs to be understood.
Esto es lo que tenemos que entender.
And I also see that there is very little knowledge about China in Latin America, Africa, and other countries.
Y también he visto que aquí en América Latina, en África y en demás lugares no hay tanto conocimiento de China.
I have not been to too many, but I was in Brazil, I was in Colombia, Mexico last time.
No es que estén en muchos lados, pero sí fui a Brasil, a Colombia y a México.
And I was asking, have you heard about Belt and Road Initiative?
Y les preguntaba si han escuchado sobre la nueva ruta de la seda.
Among the students, can you raise hand about how many have heard about the Belt and Road Initiative in
Ustedes
China?
levanten la mano quienes sí han escuchado de esto.
Okay, that's good. At least it's better than some other universities.
Está bien porque en otras universidades no.
Then I would say you know a little bit about China.
Entonces puedo decir que saben un poquito de China.
Because China spends, why I'm talking about Mexican trade deficit with China,
Aquí les estoy platicando sobre el déficit comercial de China con México.
2024 you had 115 billion trade deficit with China.
En 2024 tenía 115,000 millones de dólares en déficit.
The United States had more than 300 billion trade deficit with China every single year.
Estados Unidos cada año tiene más de 300,000 millones de dólares de déficit con China.
That is why President Trump is making a lot of noise to rebalance the trade.
Por eso el presidente Trump está haciendo tanto ruido sobre balancear y equilibrar un poco de comercio.
The 27 European nations
De las 27 naciones europeas,
have 400 billion trade deficit with China every single year
tienen un déficit de 400,000 millones de dólares cada año,
because they sell only 200 billion and buy 600 billion from China.
porque compran 600,000 millones, pero venden solo 200,000 millones.
So simple mathematics,
Entonces, con matemáticas simples,
400 plus 300 plus 100 is already 800 billion.
400 más 300 más bien, pues ya son 800,000 millones de dólares.
Now, because of the tariff war,
Entonces ahora, por la guerra tarifaria,
you are already seeing more than 20% increase in imports from China to Southeast Asian nations.
han visto las exportaciones de China al sudeste asiático ya han crecido el 20%.
Europe also saw more than 20% increase of imports from China.
En Europa también crecieron las importaciones de China en 20%.
The Chinese government is forcing Europeans to buy.
Y es que el gobierno chino está forzando
I'm
a
not
las
saying
europeas.
I'm not saying it. It's the European diplomats who tell me
Yo no lo estoy
that
diciendo,
this is what is happening.
sino que los diplomáticos europeos con los que yo hablo me lo comentan.
How? If you don't buy our goods, we don't send rare earth to you.
Que les dicen, si no me compras todas estas cosas que te estoy vendiendo, yo no te voy a vender los productos de tierras raras.
Automobile industries have to close down.
Entonces, la industria automovilística, por ejemplo, tiene que cerrar.
So next week,
La siguiente semana,
in South Korea,
en Corea del Sur,
Xi Jinping and Trump may have a meeting.
Xi Jinping y Trump pueden que tengan una reunión.
So President Trump was already saying, number one, fentanyl.
El presidente Trump ya decía, número 1, fentanilo.
Number two, rare earth.
Número 2, tierras raras.
China, don't play the rare earth game with me.
China, tú no puedes jugar el juego de las tierras raras conmigo.
And number three, soybeans.
Y número 3,
Soybean.
el
Soya.
de la soya.
Because American Midwest produce a lot of soya, they export it to China and China is blocking.
Porque Estados Unidos exporta mucha soya y China la está bloqueando.
So we are already seeing, you check the numbers in Mexico,
Y entonces pues ya pueden ver los números en México.
it's going to increase
Va a seguir creciendo.
because of your relation with United States and United States relation with Canada. Your NAFTA treaty was gone, now it has to be renegotiated next year. There's already 25%, and there's a lot of noise about this.
Porque pues hay mucho ruido por las relaciones con Estados Unidos, pero también con Canadá, por la renegociación que va a haber el siguiente año, y pues los aranceles que ya están al 25%.
3 weeks ago, I was in Canada, in Ottawa.
Hace 3 semanas, estuve en Ottawa, en Canadá.
I told the same thing to the Canadians, I'm worried about Canada.
Y les dije lo mismo que les estoy diciendo a ustedes, estoy muy preocupado por Canadá.
Because Canada already has trade deficit with China.
Porque Canadá ya tiene este déficit comercial con China.
Now whether China, and they want to recalibrate relations with India and China,
Y quieren repensar sus relaciones con China.
I said that's good, you recalibrate relations with China and India.
Y les dije que bueno, sí tienen que repensar estas relaciones con China y con India.
But the question is whether China is going to force you to buy more or you can sell more to China.
Pero entonces China les va a comprar, les va a forzar, compren más o ustedes les van a vender más a China.
China needs all the market for its own production.
China necesita todo el mercado para toda la producción.
Housing market collapse in China.
El mercado inmobiliario ha colapsado en China.
People have some money in the pocket that is in the housing.
Las personas tienen un poco de dinero y invierten en inmobiliario.
Government tried some stimulus methods, but it's not improving.
Y el gobierno ha implementado ciertos estímulos, pero no funcionan.
The biggest housing companies like Evergrande closed down, finished.
Y las grandes inmobiliarias están cerrando.
Now government decide, okay, we cannot save the housing, let us put all our money in manufacturing.
Y el gobierno ha dicho, bueno, pues no podemos salvar el mercado inmobiliario, pues gastemos, invirtamos en toda la manufactura.
So there is a lot of automation, there is a lot of robotics.
Entonces hay muchísima automatización,
Oh,
mucha robótica.
I forgot to talk about the implication, because now you're talking about $1 trillion of foreign exchange reserve with the Chinese government. They have access.
Entonces se me había olvidado comentar que pues, China tiene un exceso, una sobreproducción de al menos $1 billón.
And they spend it on space technology.
Y esto lo gastan pues en tecnología espacial.
And they are really doing well. Huge competition to the developed nations, in the Western free democratic nations.
Y pues son una competencia muy grande para los países occidentales democráticos.
They are spending on artificial intelligence.
Están gastando en inteligencia
They
artificial.
are spending on dual-use technology to support Russia with the Ukraine war.
Están gastando en esto para poder financiar la guerra con Ucrania.
And they spend it on Belt and Road Initiative.
Pero lo están gastando también en la ruta de la seda.
Billions and billions of dollars.
millones de dólares.
So many countries are now in debt with China.
Entonces muchos países están en deuda con
They are not able to pay back the loans.
y no han podido pagar sus deudas.
Then what China does,
Lo que hace China
they take over land.
es que entonces toman tierras,
Not your rural land, strategic ports.
no sus tierras rurales, sino que puertos estratégicos.
They have already taken part of the Sikyong port in Cambodia.
Por ejemplo, ya han tomado parte del puerto Sikyong en Camboya,
They have already taken over Coco Islands in Burma.
ya tomaron las islas Coco en Cuba.
They built a big airport and a seaport for Sri Lanka. There is no business. Sri Lanka not able to pay back the loan, so they have taken over the Hambantota port.
Entonces abrieron, por ejemplo, un aeropuerto y puerto marítimo en Sri Lanka, pero Sri Lanka, esperando que hubiera mucho comercio a partir de ello, pues ya no pudo pagarlo porque no hubo este comercio y entonces China tomó el puerto marítimo.
China built the Guadalajara port in Pakistan, in Balochistan.
China construyó un puerto,
Port.
el puerto Guadalajara en Chilistán, en Pakistán.
Very strategic location.
Es una estrategia, una posición muy estratégica.
So they built the port and then they are linking this port to mainland China
Y entonces construyen este puerto y lo relacionan,
through a project called China-Pakistan Economic Corridor with $60 billion.
lo enlazaron a China con este corredor que está construyendo Pakistán-China, en el que invirtieron 16 millones de dólares.
Pakistan is in deep problem.
Pakistán tiene muchos problemas
They are not able to pay back the loans.
porque no van a poder pagar estos préstamos.
Now China has taken over the water port,
Y entonces China tomó este puerto
which gives them access to the whole of Arabian Sea.
que les da acceso al mar Arábigo.
And China's good friend Iran,
Y por ejemplo, el buen amigo de China, Irán,
they have taken over a big port in Djibouti.
también tomaron un puerto muy importante en Djibouti.
This will become a very important military site for China if there is a war in the region and China has to be involved.
Y este va a ser un sitio estratégico muy importante militarmente para China si es que se desenlaza un conflicto en la región.
China has stake in Greece ports,
China también ha tomado puertos en Grecia,
in Portugal,
en Portugal
and also a small part of Hamburg port
y en partes
in Germany.
en Alemania y en Hamburgo.
So they built the land roads, railways, infrastructure through what they call as the land Silk Road.
Entonces han construido esta infraestructura terrestre para conectarlos como la ruta de la seda.
And they take over strategic locations in what they call the maritime Silk Road through the Indian Ocean.
Pero entonces también han tomado por los mares estos puertos haciendo la ruta de la seda marítima.
I don't know how many of you know about Malacca Straits.
No sé cuántos de ustedes conocen de esto.
It is one of the most important straits for business with South China Sea and Indian Ocean. Every ship has to go through this.
Si conocen sobre esto que les están dando de Malacas, que es el puente por el que pasan.
China wants to build another strait to make sure that if they land up in problem in Malacca Strait, they can avoid that.
Entonces China quiere construir otro pase para que si tienen un problema y puedan controlarlo.
Over the last 10 years, China invested a lot of money in Africa.
Y por ejemplo, China en los últimos años ha invertido muchísimo dinero en África.
Last year,
El último año,
20 countries, representative of 20 African countries went to China
representantes de al menos 20 países de África fueron a China
to restructure loan payment because they're not able to do it.
para reestructurar su deuda porque no están pudiendo pagar.
I said here also when I was here in Guadalajara last time,
La vez pasada que estuve aquí en Guadalajara,
initially the governor decided to meet with us.
inicialmente yo iba a ver al gobernador,
Then there was a love letter from the Chinese ambassador.
pero entonces el embajador chino le escribió una carta de amor.
Okay, you meet Penpa?
Ah, bueno, pues te vas a reunir con Penpa,
Your metro project is gone.
el proyecto del metro se cancela.
I thought, oh, I'm quite powerful.
Y dije, ay, qué poderoso soy.
But the governor did not meet me.
Y entonces el gobernador no me vio.
So it's good that I get opportunities like today to speak to you about these realities.
Entonces agradezco mucho oportunidades como esta para hablarles sobre la realidad que vivo políticamente.
Latin America, same thing.
En América Latina lo mismo.
Last year when I was in India, I was watching news about the Chinese president going there and the president of Peru opening a huge port in Peru.
El año pasado, estando en India, pude ver las noticias que fue el presidente chino a Perú a abrir un puerto
Now this
importante.
will become a main gateway for Chinese products to come into Latin America.
Esta va a ser una entrada principal para que China pueda entrar a América Latina.
So Peru president was very happy to announce all this.
Y la presidenta peruana estaba muy contenta de todo esto.
I hope the Peruvians won't have to cry after a few years.
Espero que no lo sufran unos años.
And this is what China is doing all around the world.
Todo esto es lo que China está haciendo en el mundo.
So that is why I say give less business to China. You don't have to be dependent only on Chinese products.
Y por eso les digo, es que tienen que darle menos negocio a China, no pueden solo depender de un país.
Even if you have to pay a little more for your own products.
Incluso si hay que pagar un poco más por los productos.
So our friends in Europe tell me, oh, the dragon is biting at us.
Entonces mis amigos europeos dicen, no, es que el dragón nos está mordiendo.
Dragon meaning China.
El dragón siendo China.
So I tell them, dragon was very weak at one point.
Y yo les digo, es que el dragón era muy débil en algún momento de la historia.
Who made the dragon so powerful?
¿Quién lo hizo tan poderoso?
America.
Estados Unidos.
You don't have to read too many books. Just read one book, Kissinger on China.
No tienes que leer muchos libros, puedes solo leer uno, que es el libro de Kissinger, el de China.
European investment in China.
La inversión, perdón, de China.
Before 2020, everybody was making money, so everybody is so happy and they don't want to talk about human rights, no Tibet, no Uyghur, nothing.
Antes de 2020, pues todo el mundo estaba haciendo tanto dinero con estas negociaciones que pues no hablamos de derechos humanos, no hablamos de Tibet, no hablamos de nada de esto.
Now, German automobile industry, all are coming back.
Ahora, por ejemplo, la industria automovilista alemana, pues ya está haciendo su paso para atrás de China.
BYD sells more than Tesla.
BYD vende muchísimo más que Tesla.
So, Taiwan.
Taiwán, por ejemplo.
Taiwan invested a lot of money in China.
Taiwán invirtió muchísimo dinero en China.
Today, they are suffering to struggle to save themselves from China.
Y hoy están luchando muchísimo por salvarse de China.
And our good friends, Japanese also, same thing. Japanese, Japan.
Nuestros amigos de Japón también.
Also a lot of investment.
También muchas inversiones.
Japanese, some 17, 18 Japanese business people are still in prison in China. They are not able to bring them out.
17, 18 personas de negocios japoneses siguen en la prisión en China.
So all of us are responsible for making China so big.
Entonces todas las personas somos responsables de hacer a China tan grande.
Now knowing that the dragon is biting at you,
Entonces sabiendo que el dragón te está mordiendo,
if you still keep feeding the dragon, then whose fault is it?
si lo sigues alimentando, ¿de quién es la culpa?
I think now the world is learning a little more about China.
Creo que ahora el mundo está aprendiendo un poco más sobre China.
I think you also need to learn more about China.
Y creo que ustedes también pueden aprender un poco más sobre China.
I'd really like to see good think tanks in Mexico to study about China.
Por ejemplo, me gustaría mucho ver think tanks, centros de estudios que puedan analizar a China en México.
Politicians don't have time.
Los políticos no tienen tiempo de hacer esto.
They are either busy making money
Están ansiosos por seguir haciendo dinero
and making sure that they don't do the job that they need to do.
y haciéndose cargo de los trabajos que tienen que hacer.
Very short-term interests.
Son intereses a muy corto plazo.
So you have China agents in the Senate,
Entonces, por ejemplo, hay amigos de China en el Senado,
in the Cámara de Diputados also,
en la Cámara de Diputados también,
in the business community.
en la comunidad de negocios.
You have people everywhere, Chinese everywhere.
Hay personas que apoyan a China en todos lados.
So I would recommend another book for you to read.
Y les voy a recomendar otro libro
It's called The Hidden Hand.
que se llama La mano escondida.
It's co-authored by Dr. Mary Allbuck from German Marshall Fund and Dr. Clive Hamilton from Australia. This gives you a very graphic understanding of how communist government is organized in China.
Este libro nos da un esquema muy gráfico de cómo es que empezó el comunismo en China.
And how China uses all kinds of means to influence the free democratic world, taking advantage of their transparency.
Y cómo China toma todos los medios que puede para hacerse del mundo libre, aprovechando su capacidad.
So these are some lessons that we need to know. I can speak for hours and hours and hours.
Estas son algunas lecciones que podemos aprender y pues yo podría seguir hablando y hablando por horas.
But I also want to know what you want to know.
Pero me gustaría saber ustedes qué quieren saber.
So the human rights situation in Tibet is like the George Orwell's 1984 coming into reality in this world.
La situación de derechos humanos en el Tíbet es como si la novela de George Orwell en 1984 se hiciera realidad.
Where the state controls and surveils every single citizen.
Donde el Estado controla y analiza a cada ciudadano y ciudadana.
Every single person in China is now turned into a code, a digital code.
Cada persona en Tíbet tiene un código digital.
They can track everything about you, all your payments, all your money trade, everything.
Pueden rastrear todo sobre ti, tus pagos, todo el dinero que tienes, los movimientos, todo lo rastrean.
You have CCTVs everywhere.
Hay sistemas de videovigilancia en todos lados.
So in some places you will see some 10, 15 cameras lined up in one place.
Entonces puedes ver en un lugar 10 o 15 cámaras ahí.
Then you have all the angles of your face.
Y pues entonces tienes todas las cámaras en tu cara.
China can recognize you everywhere you go through facial recognition.
China te puede ver en donde sea que estés mediante
DNA testing.
mediante el testeo de ADN.
Today, if I have to burn myself, because there were already 157 self-immolations from 2009 to about 2 years ago in Tibet.
Hasta hoy ya ha habido 657 personas inmoladas que se queman vivas desde 2009.
And most of them were between the age of 17 to 35 Tibetans.
La mayoría de ellos tienen entre 17 y 35 años.
Put kerosene and burned themselves,
Que se pusieron gasolina y se quemaron vivos.
hoping against hope that the Chinese government will pay some attention to their plight.
Esperando, con toda esperanza, con respuesta,
hoping,
China los viera.
hoping against hope that the international community will come to their rescue.
Esperando, sin esperar tanto, que la comunidad internacional viniera a su rescate.
Unfortunately, Chinese government makes sure that there is no evidence. Of course, we got a lot of footages, but Chinese government makes sure that there is no evidence.
Y desafortunadamente el gobierno chino se encarga de que no haya evidencia de que esto ocurre.
Today, if I'm in Tibet and if I think about burning myself,
Si yo estuviera en Tíbet y pensara en quemarme a mí mismo,
I have to think 100 times.
yo lo tendría que pensar 100 veces.
Because all my relatives, all my friends, the relatives they can track through DNA.
Porque a todos mis familiares y a todas mis amistades los pueden rastrear con el ADN.
So it's not only me, all my family members are going to suffer because of that.
Entonces no solo sufro yo, sino todos mis familiares.
So I will close by saying Mexico today is a democratic country, just like many other democracies around the world.
Entonces voy a estar diciendo que pues México es una democracia como muchas otras naciones democráticas del mundo.
You respect human dignity,
Ustedes respetan la dignidad humana,
freedom,
la libertad,
democracy.
la democracia.
And yesterday I was in your chamber, in your parliament.
Ayer estuve en la Cámara de Diputados.
2 years before I was also in the same chamber, and the Deputy Caro welcomed us in the chamber.
Hace 2 años también pude ir al Congreso Federal gracias a un diputado que nos invitó.
And we heard your history.
Y escuchamos sobre la historia de México.
You also went through dictatorship at one point of time.
México también tuvo una dictadura en algún punto de la historia.
And I don't think you want dictatorship and authoritarianism in Mexico in future.
Y yo no creo que quisieran una dictadura o otro totalitarismo en un futuro.
If you don't want that to happen to your country,
Si no quieren que eso pase en su país,
then make sure that it does not happen in other countries also.
tienen que asegurarse de que eso tampoco ocurra en otros países.
Because China is not only talking about Chinese or within China.
porque China no solo habla de los chinos o de las personas que viven en China.
China is talking about global security initiative.
China también habla de seguridad internacional y de cosas que van a venir.
China is talking about global civilizational initiative.
Tiene una iniciativa de civilización global.
And China is talking about global cultural initiative.
Y también una iniciativa de cultura global.
And after the United States withdrew from the UN Human Rights Council
Y después de que los Estados Unidos se
during
salieran
the first Trump presidency,
del Consejo de los Derechos Humanos durante la primera presidencia de Trump,
China jumped in the United Nations.
China entró a las Naciones Unidas.
Today they define human rights as to how they want the world to understand human rights,
Y definen los derechos humanos como ellos quieren que sean definidos,
not how the world describes human rights.
no como el mundo los describe.
They want to export their system of governance.
Quieren exportar su sistema de gobierno.
So, do you want China to export authoritarianism to your country?
Entonces quisieran que China exportase el totalitarismo a su país.
You have already lost part of your sovereignty.
Ya han perdido parte de su soberanía.
Look at United Nations.
Vean las Naciones Unidas.
Last year was the Universal Periodic Report of Human Rights in China.
El año pasado fue el examen periódico universal de China en las Naciones Unidas.
Only 23 countries supported Tibet and Uyghurs and Mongols.
Solo 23 países apoyaron a los tibetanos, a los uigures y a los mongoles.
Not a single country from Latin America.
Ninguno de América Latina.
Not a single country from Africa.
Ninguno de África.
Not a single country from Southeast Asia.
Ninguno del sudeste asiático.
Not a single country from Shanghai Cooperation Organization in Central Asia.
Ninguno de la Agencia de Cooperación de Asia Central de Shanghai.
Mexican leadership are not blind.
Los liderazgos mexicanos pues no son ciegos.
I'm sure they know what is happening.
Estoy muy seguro de que saben lo que está pasando en China.
But your foreign minister was nicknamed as China Boy by the United States.
Pero inclusive el secretario de Relaciones Exteriores anterior le denominaba de niño China desde Estados Unidos.
And you don't have the freedom to express yourself in the United Nations.
Y no tienen la libertad de expresarse como quisieran en las Naciones Unidas.
Ask your people in the Foreign Office where did the pressure come from.
Pregúntenle a su secretario de Relaciones Exteriores de dónde viene esa presión.
You will know that you have lost part of your sovereignty.
Sabrán que ya han perdido parte de su soberanía.
Thank you so much for boring you with all this lecture.
Muchas gracias por permitirme aburrirlos con todo esto.
Okay, if you want to bore with me with some questions,
Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for this enlightening and this amazing food for thought that will encourage our students and our academics to follow through with research and with their genuine interest in Tibet from now on. Le agradecemos enormemente esta presentación tan emotiva, tan enriquecedora y que nos motivará a partir de ahora quienes no tenían esta curiosidad aún en investigar un poco más, en adentrarnos en los temas de China y del reconocimiento de los esfuerzos del pueblo tibetano. Le quiero compartir que nosotros en la universidad tenemos el Departamento de Estudios del Pacífico, donde tenemos varios especialistas que hoy nos acompañan. Y este interés ha existido por décadas. Y yo creo que la perspectiva de la conferencia de hoy nos deja un ángulo interesantísimo y más que nunca pertinente de ser observado. La defensa de los derechos humanos desde muchísimas aristas. Yo creo que aquí hablamos de incluso el riesgo de que se tengan los datos biométricos centralizados, una serie de temas que, bueno, yo creo que a nuestros estudiantes les van a dar ideas de tesis, ya les pueden ir anotando. Le quiero decir que esta siempre será su casa. La universidad es una casa abierta para las ideas, para la diversidad, para el pensamiento crítico. Y yo creo que a nosotros nos hace también ver desde una óptica distinta a este juego del ajedrez político de nuestro gobierno hacia el interior y hacia afuera. Las juventudes deben conocer los pormenores de este tipo de conflictos silenciosos, porque han sido silenciados con una muy triste razón, ¿no? La censura, de la que podemos también nosotros ser objeto, es uno de los crímenes más graves que puede ejercer un gobierno, porque coartando la libertad de expresión se coarta la libertad en general. Yo lo quiero invitar incluso a que haya colaboraciones de investigación de estudiantes que pudieran estar interesados en el tema. Estoy segura de que muchos de quienes nos ven y nos verán en la retransmisión seguramente van a tener un tremendo interés. Entonces nos ponemos a sus órdenes y afortunadamente la libertad de cátedra, la libertad de pensamiento que nos da esta casa de estudios, pues nos permitirá recibir cualquier carta de amor que pueda ser enviado.
You are beautiful, so you will receive more love letters.
No. I'm too busy. I have plenty of questions. O sea, yo quisiera preguntarle muchísimas cosas y creo que me inspiré ahorita en este cierre, pero no quiero apoderarme del micrófono. Seguramente ustedes tienen preguntas e inquietudes. Ahora lo tienen aquí. Aprovechen, porque yo volteé a ver, yo vi muchas caras, muchos además que estuvieron haciendo una grabación sobre partes muy relevantes de su presentación, que seguramente las compartirán con sus compañeros y compañeras. Vi muchas cabecitas que hacían así, ¿no? Reconociendo mucho de lo que se nos dice aquí. Entonces, aprovechen el foro, aprovechen a nuestro invitado, que yo creo que es valiosísimo tenerlo entre nosotros. ¿Quién se anima?
Let's take 3 questions together and then.
And then my question is, I have heard that for the 100 years of the China Communist Party, they want to recover all its former territory from the Qing dynasty, if I'm right. And my question is, do you think they will be willing to fight a war to get them back?
Fight a war with? To get
First of all, thank you for your talk. It was really interesting to hear everything that Tibet has suffered because of China's government. And I wanted to ask you, as you said at the last part of your talk, we already lost sovereignty, mainly because of how powerful is China economically speaking, and how can we as a civil society fight against that power? Because of how cheap are some of these like BYD, the cars, the cell phone, the smartphones, all of those goods are so cheap that it looks like it's impossible to fight against them. So how can we fight against that power? Thank you so much for your talk.
Buenas tardes, es un honor conocerlo, seguramente no solo para mí, sino para todos. Yo lo que me gustaría preguntar es, ¿usted qué les diría a las juventudes en cómo nosotros podemos involucrarnos para recuperar la soberanía país. Usted lo menciona mucho y creo, y lo creemos todos, creo, que sí hemos perdido parte de nuestra soberanía, que dependemos bastante de otros países, de otros estados, ya que nuestras empresas nacionales no son tan fuertes a nivel internacional como para poder hacerles juego o enfrentarlos a ellos. Así que, ¿usted qué nos diría a nosotros como jóvenes para poder hacerlo? Porque a veces nos sentimos impotentes en que nuestra voz no se escuche, en que nuestro pensamiento no se escuche ni haga nada para realmente cambiar nuestro país. Gracias.
So the first question, Qing Dynasty, 100 years. I didn't understand the context fully, but still there is this, when you talk about Qing Dynasty, the territory of Qing Dynasty, because Tibet was not part of Qing Dynasty. You can talk about Qing Dynasty came into being in 1644. The fifth Dalai Lama took over the spiritual and temporal leadership in 1642, 2 years before the formation of Qing Dynasty, after the Ming Dynasty. The fifth Dalai Lama was so powerful, not militarily, but he had too much influence on the Mongols because of Buddhism. Even now, our Mongolian friends would say, it's you Tibetans who turned us into Buddhists and then we became militarily less powerful, because otherwise Mongols were warriors and they fight and so because of Buddhism, even Tibetans were warriors at one time. Our empire from 7th to 9th century at one time extended from the capital Sikyong, because we captured China's capital at one time. And then our empire went up to Samarkand, present-day Samarkand. That used to be the extent of Tibetan empire between 8th to 9th century. But after that, we had 400 years of disintegration, and then our relations with the Mongols and all that. So, Qing Dynasty was most powerful between 1735 to 1795, for almost 60 years. The rest of the period, they were not so powerful. Then, in the 19th century, you talk about the Opium War, 1839, and all that. And China, even today, is talking about 100 years of humiliation. That is starting from the Opium War. And China itself was so powerless. How can they control Tibet? And today, if you listen to Chinese analysts, experts, propaganda machinery that goes around the world and talks about Western imperialism over China, they're talking about 100 years of humiliation. They don't talk about Chinese colonization of Tibet, because they have double standards everywhere. So Qing Dynasty, if you consider the influence of Qing Dynasty in this region, today's China is the biggest. Now, maybe you are referring to getting Taiwan back as part of the 100 years.
Yeah, I was talking about the king.
Qing. King.
Yeah, Qing Dynasty.
Yeah, that is Qing. Q-I-N-G. Yeah, that's Qing. For in Chinese, I don't know what they call the English Q is Chang. So you have to get used to this. So this Q-I-N-G is Qing Dynasty. So Qing Dynasty is from 1644 to 1911. So they were most powerful between 1735 and 1795. After that, they were not so powerful. So the territory of Qing, today's China is bigger than Qing Dynasty. And Taiwan was never ruled by China. But now they claim that Taiwan is part of China. So if you are a student of international relations, that you need to understand this concept of one China policy and one China principle. One China principle is between mainland China and Taiwan. Both say that there is only one China. Both say that we are the real rulers of China. This went on about till 1992. Maybe it ended by 1996 because then Taiwan democratized, and now Taiwan had to save itself instead of claiming its rule over mainland China. So that is one China principle between the mainland and Taiwan, nothing to do with internationally. But one China policy came into being only in 1979. You know about Richard Nixon, Kissinger going into China, 1972 Shanghai Communique, and then 7 years after that, for the first time in 1989, there was the formalization of relations between the United States and China. And after the formalization of that, then they came out with the Taiwan Relations Act, which is still defined as strategic ambiguity from the US side. So US can still think that they can sell weapons to China and all that. So these two concepts need to be understood separately. Otherwise, some people mix up with one China principle, one China policy. So every country says, oh, we have one China policy. But when it comes to Tibet, we say, okay, we have nothing to do with one China policy. Because our relation with China is the 1951 17-point agreement. And from there we start as to how we go about our relation with China. So China has, they always talk about rejuvenation of the great nation, and then getting Taiwan back into the mainland. So all these things are happening. But I don't know, some people ask me, do you think China will attack Taiwan? I say, China is not ready yet. They are not ready. If you heard last Friday's news, China purged 9 military generals. This is unprecedented in Communist Party history. And the top person is Guadalajara, who is the vice chairman of the Central Military Commission, just next to Xi Jinping. And all these 9 generals are supposed to be loyalists of Xi Jinping. Most of these people, Guadalajara, Penpa, all these people were appointed by Xi Jinping himself. But today they are being pushed. Nobody knows whether it's Xi Jinping himself doing or it's some other forces that is forcing Xi Jinping to take these steps. Because if you look at the coverage of the news on this, first the Defense Ministry came out with a statement about the purge, and then later the official propaganda machinery, but they didn't pick up the same story as it was in the Defense Ministry. So you have to understand the Chinese system, how they function. You have the People's Congresses, then you have the Communist Party apparatus. In the military also, you have the military generals. You think they are powerful, but then you also have the political commissars that oversees the military generals. And particularly during Xi Jinping's time, that he has formed so many commissions. Behind every ministry, there is a commission. And the actual power lies with the commission, not with the ministry. So if you think you are meeting China's foreign ministry, top diplomat and all that, no, they are being dictated from behind. So you still have Wang Yi, very old man. He's supposed to be retired, he's supposed to be the commission, but he's still there as foreign minister because they are not able to find another foreign minister. You know, I don't want to say that name because I was told it's very bad in China, in Mexican, the former Chinese foreign minister. If I say that maybe I might affront you, I don't know. His name was Sikyong. And it's bad Mexican word, Spanish word. He is not to be seen. Li Shangguo, former defense minister, and the minister before that, not to be seen. Now lately, just last month, Hu Jintao, who is the minister for the United Front Home Department, International Relations, he was visiting Algeria and some countries. When he was back, it's gone, not to be seen. So you see all these developments in China. And when you have people from rocket forces being kicked out, who are supposed to have the expertise to, and among the people who were in the 9 people that you list out, there was also the commander of the Eastern Theater, and there is the commander of the Southern Theater. So when all these people are kicked out, you need to replace them. They are not able to replace now. So the people, the inner circle around Xi Jinping is shrinking. Now we have to watch the plenum as we speak now. the plenum is going on, the fourth plenum, which was delayed by 1 year, which was supposed to happen last year. It didn't happen because there were a lot of problems in China. So we are talking about the soft underbellies of China. It's not as strong and monolithic as you think. If you go into the details, politics is very opaque. It's very difficult to understand. But if you watch over a longer period of time and listen more, then you will find that there are a lot of symptoms of a bigger malaise in China that's happening politically. And militarily, there are so many purges. So Xi Jinping has been undertaking anti-corruption for the last 10 years. By this time, you should have removed all corruption. But you still have military generals being persecuted because of corruption and disciplinary things. But when you have to look at Chinese words when they say disciplinary, what it means. When they say corruption, it means there's so many things that are there in the vocabulary of Chinese that you need to understand. Chinese government policy is very easy to understand. If Xi Jinping says something, every department will talk about it. And everyone really wants to do that to keep in favor with the president. But leadership change, very opaque. So you watch the plenum and see now who is there, who is not there. This is something to watch because you will not understand the full scale of China's next 5-year plan from 25 to 30 now at this plenum. You will know more details only in March. Right? So this is how you watch China over a longer period than the US. I'm sorry if I didn't understand your question right, but I tried to kind of cover that. Then the second question was about sovereignty, what can civil society do, DYD, so cheap and all that. Now, if you are really concerned, it should be the politicians, people who govern your country that should be responsible for how you respond to these challenges. Nobody is saying you don't have good relations with China. You have to deal internationally. Everybody has to deal with each other. And there was, from Tibetan side also, we never say cut off your ties, complete decoupling. We're not talking about this. Have good relations. But then again, China has to be a responsible power. It's the second largest economy in the world. And in the name of green technology and all that, they have electric cars, they have solar plants, they have hydroelectricity, but we are suffering in Tibet. When China is touting themselves as the leader of green technology, of course they are the largest polluter in the world today. But even then, now you talk about solar panels, solar plants. In my father's region, China has built a 163 square kilometers of solar panels. Now what impact that has on our land, nobody assesses. People think, oh, solar energy is good for green energy. Talk about hydroelectricity. They are damming all rivers, which we already talked about in Tibet. We are suffering inside Tibet in the name of green technology. So this also needs to be understood in the form of the EV cars also. Okay, you get EV cars, maybe you will have a better environment. But to produce all these batteries, to produce all these rare earth, how much pollution is happening in China? Why do you think China controls 90% of rare earth? That is because China doesn't mind polluting Tibet or other regions of China. US doesn't want to pollute itself, so they have very limited processing systems. So over the years, over the last 2-3 decades, China built expertise in mining, in processing, in separation of metals, and they have all the technology. So now they know they have the upper hand over the world, so they are talking about banning rare earth materials, banning technology along with it, not just banning export of metals, but they are banning technology and human resources, expertise in this. So they know they have a chokehold on the world, and that is why they are doing it. And it's not environment friendly to produce magnets. It's not environment friendly to produce rare earth. The final product may be beautiful, but the whole process of if you see a beautiful person now, the whole cosmetics that you have to go through is very, very dangerous, very, very polluting, very, very harmful. So we have to take into consideration every level of processing, not just look at the final product and say this is good. So I think you have to build more awareness. That's what civil society can do. Because in universities, at least here, I found quite a number of you raising hand about BRI, but other places this morning, not one hand. Yesterday, I was speaking to the public, not one hand. Nobody knows what China is doing. So if people understand what China is doing, what their intentions are, what their motivations are, then they will rethink. As soon as they see made in China, they will rethink, whether it's a small toy or it's a BYD car or any other thing that comes from China. So you have to create more awareness, and this is what civil society can do. And then fight against it. Number 3 is the youth involvement and how to lead against sovereignty, not strong internationally. If you consider yourself weak, then others will also consider you weak. We have this Tibetan saying, you hit the butter at the stone, the butter loses. You hit stone at a butter, also the butter loses. So if you think you are the butter and China is the stone, then you will keep losing. That's why I give another anecdote. One of our friends in Germany, again, I keep talking like this all the time. And then I ask them, okay, I talk so much, what is the takeaway from my talks? They say, we don't want to be donkeys. So I give this analogy saying, right now you're on your 2 feet. China always asks you to kowtow, because they think they are the emperor of the little kingdom. So they always ask you to kowtow, to bow down. So you kowtow too much, then your hands will also become legs. Then you will be on your force. Then you will become like a donkey. Then China will keep riding you. That is, if you don't stand up for your values. So that is why my friends say we don't want to be donkeys. But if you don't want to be donkeys, then you have to stand up for your values. If you don't stand up for your values, China will keep riding you. And that's the mentality of Chinese. So China respects only strength, not weakness. Mexico is not a small country. It's a big country. Maybe not top level. But again, democracies need to come together. I was listening to this story in Canada where, okay, there's a problem with China and Canada, so Canada can only buy oil imported into China. But China has no problem because they get the same oil from Australia. With Europe also, I keep telling them, you guys don't have a common foreign policy and a common trade policy. That is why China picks. China divides and rule in Europe. If one country doesn't, if France doesn't listen, they go to Germany. If Germany doesn't listen, they go to Italy. That's how they do. Just like how the colonials used to play against the colonies. Same tactic China is using against the Europeans today. Of divide and rule, carrot and stick. All that is happening. So the coalition of democracies need to come together as governments at the international level to challenge China in different ways. When I was in Norway seemed very cowed down after they conferred Liu Xiaobo with the Nobel Peace Prize. And there was too much pressure from the Chinese government. Now, if you compare Norway with China, Norway is so small, China is so big, and they are not able to confront it. And no other European nations came to support Norway. So China wins all the time. This happens with all countries in Europe. Now if all the Europeans come together, then it will be very difficult because you're looking at a 600 billion market in Europe. And China cannot do without that. Almost half of China's foreign exchange reserve comes from Europe. And Europe needs to understand that. Why is Mexico, China afraid of China? Does China need Mexico more or Mexico needs China more? Because you're not selling more to China. If you're selling more to China, then you should be afraid. Okay, China might stop this, and you end up having a problem. But you're buying more from China. And China is benefiting more from trade with you. So you should be in the upper hand to dictate terms to China, not the other way around. That's why I talked about the butter story. So you have to understand that you have leverage and you need to use it. But if politicians, because of some gains, don't do it, then it's very difficult. But you're talking about the responsibility of the youth. Right? Elect the right politicians. Elect the right politicians. This morning also I said, if politicians want to become rich, do business. Why join politics? You join politics to serve your people, not to make money out of people or from others. You have to understand that everything is wrong with education. Right? Everything is too material. So there has to be moral values. And if politicians you're a politician, I'm Christian, I'm Buddhist, I'm Islam, but are they guided by the moral values of these religions? No. But how much you will keep making money? Presidents, prime ministers, billionaires, we are all born in the world. We live up to a certain age, then we have to die. You cannot carry all that $1 billion with you into the next life, or if you don't believe in next life, to heaven or hell or wherever. And before you die, if you die a natural death, if you die in an accident, there is no time to think. Air crash, no time to think. Maybe the easiest way to die. In seconds you die. But if you die naturally, on your deathbed, you have to think what right things I did in my life, what wrong things did I do in my life. If you have done all wrong things, then you will be troubled. You won't even have a peaceful death. If you have lived a good life with values, not just for yourself, also for others, then you can die a peaceful death. And you don't have to worry about it. I think billionaires, that's what I mentioned in that television interview with Enrica. I don't think billionaires and President Xi Jinping and President Putin have good sleep. Because they are always worried as to who will topple them all the time. So they have to constantly alert on who is going to hurt them, harm them, dethrone them. And billionaires have to watch over so much wealth. And sometimes, even with all that money, you do illegal things. So you being a billionaire end up in jail. What is the use? There has to be some limit. So it's very important for you to think, not I'm weak. If you think I'm weak, you're weak. Then you are not able to express yourself. But you have to understand your strength as well and use it as a leverage as others are using, but not to harm others. To grow together. For Tibetans also, now we are not seeking independence from China. Chinese government keeps calling Dalai Lama separatist. Dalai Lama keeps saying autonomy, genuine autonomy. Now who wants Tibet to be separated from China? Is it the Chinese government or the Dalai Lama? So things like that. And Chinese communism is built on a foundation of lies. That's the problem. They lie once, to cover one lie, they tell another lie. So it's endless number of lies. And today they claim they are the virtuous ones, they are the good guys. So you saw Putin, Kim Jong-un, and all those people on one platform, all good guys. Yeah? So I think we have to have a global understanding, a holistic understanding, and then see how to respond in a particular situation. I cannot recommend one specific thing for all the ills. So you will have to find out, understand the reality, and then find out how you can handle the situation on your own. Just apply your mind. Given all these things I said today, don't just believe because I said it. You're all students. You have your professors here. They teach you how to develop critical mind. Look at different sources, even newspapers. Just don't rely on one source of information. When there is one news is out, look at several sources. Find out how reliable the sources are. I always, before I read a book, I always try to understand the author first and his background. Then you understand the mental inclination of that author, and you can make some judgment about the content of the book because of that author's background. Movie also, same thing. Look at the director, the writer. Don't just look only at the vision. Yeah? Okay. Yeah, I think we are running short of time. We have another meeting.
Agradezcándole por favor con un aplauso muy sentido de parte de esta comunidad académica. And the privilege, and as I said before, this will always be home.
Thank you.
And you're always welcome.
Muchas gracias.
De nada. Gracias a todas y todos por estar aquí y por ahí.